Assalamualaikum and a very good day to everyone. Welcome to our MOOC on good clinical documentation practices. So in this MOOC, what we want to give you basically is to update your knowledge on the good documentation skills that you will be needing when you become a doctor, or for those who already become a doctor but want to refresh their memories before they enter in the working environment. You are also welcome to go through this module again. Right, so basically in the first chapter is basically just to give you some introduction to the modules that we have in hand. Okay, so in this module we have a total of 6 chapters. So basically what we want you to achieve at the end of this module is basically to understand the principles of good documentation. We want you to be able to identify the common errors and avoid them, and of course finally we want you to be able to document itself. So basically what we want you to be able to do is to write clinical entry in patients' medical records, write referral letters to your colleagues, write prescription for outpatient and inpatient, and lastly write medical certificate. Throughout this course, if you have any questions, please do email me or WhatsApp me if you have any questions. Or you can also email and WhatsApp other lecturers that may assist you for your completion of this course. Okay. Upon completion of this module, which is conducted online, we will have another session where we will meet you in person for tutorial, in which we want to see you practice the documentation skills yourself. This is to enhance your skills and knowledge to make you ready for the clinical work in the future. Specifically for this first chapter, the introduction chapter, what we want you to achieve is to understand the significance of documentation in clinical work, recognize the potential consequences if documentation is not done properly, and you basically just to give you an idea what to do and what to avoid in clinical documentation. All right. So documentation is a crucial aspect of clinical work for several reasons. Especially in medical records, it serves as communication. When you make an entry, when you have a treatment plan, is basically signaling to either your colleagues or other team members, this is what you want to do. Without a proper documentation, your nurses may not be able to carry out the medical treatment plan. Okay, without documentation, you would also be in trouble legally. So documentation has been used as a shield to defend you against any medical legal consequences. And of course, documentation is also important for continuity of care. For example, in the ward, you may not be able to take care of this patient for the entire week or for the entire month. For example, your colleague, when you take leaves or when you are on holiday, your colleague will use your medical records that you have entered in the past, so that they can actually carry out the plans that you have put in place in earlier. All right, so medical records is also important for quality improvement. We usually reflect back on the treatment plan that has been carried out, and what can we improve from this clinical work. All right, and then it can also be used for research and of course for education, so students can actually learn. We learn from joining the ward rounds, we learn by reading the clinical notes. For this patient, for example, for pneumonia patients, what are the common antibiotics that doctors give, for example, when they change antibiotics. So the plan is to change the antibiotic. We want to learn what is the reason behind the change of antibiotics. So perhaps students may need to explore this by reading the medical notes. All right. So consequences of improper clinical documentation is quite troublesome. Okay, the first is miscommunication, because when you have poor documentation, people cannot read your documentation, they do not understand you. This can have a significant impact on patient safety. It is also against regulatory rules, and you can end up in legal issues. just to give you a highlight on the good medical practice guidelines, you are basically legally required to document properly as stated in this guideline. Okay, as I highlighted, such record should be, meaning that you must, okay, it should be accurate, legible, comprehensive, honest, non-judgmental, and up to date, and contribute to easy recall of patient information. Right, so easy recall of patient information is also another why we document. We have hundreds of patients daily. It is impossible for us to remember, so making clinical entry is also part of us to remind ourselves when we want to review this patient. Right, I would like to share with you a case between Medicircle Sendian Berhad versus Zulaikha Nur Zulfadli. Alright, so in this case, the patient sued the company, the hospital, but the hospital was unable to defend themselves because their medical records was missing. Okay, because these medical records was missing, they were unable to defend themselves effectively, making them liable for the medical negligence. So another example of a very bad documentation. All right, so this is a medical certificate to a school children. Basically, this child was diagnosed with chicken pox, but instead it was written chicken chop. Okay, this is based on a real case, yeah, which has become viral several years back. So what happened is that the clinic assistant is the one that assists the doctor writing the diagnosis, because the doctor is busy with another patient. But because the doctor put his signature and chop, it is deemed that he is the one who write the diagnosis. So this is a very unfortunate. Whoever assists you in documentation, when there is your job, it means that you already approved this documentation. Okay, prescription. Okay, this is another case. Prescription is more dangerous because if you write wrongly, your treatment plan is wrong. Okay, you will prescribe medication that is wrong to patient, and that is dangerous. So in this case of Dr. Nik Azam bin Wan Hamzah, he was called by the Malaysian Medical Council because he failed to keep a proper records for his dangerous drugs. Yeah, the drugs that is usually highly addictive, and usually in the wards you can see it is being kept in a alarm cupboard. Whenever you open the cupboard, you can actually hear the alarm. So what happened is that when you do not have these proper medical records, proper records of the prescription, the MMC can actually suspend you because they assume that you are actually selling this drug illegally, right? So Dr. Nik Azam was suspended for 6 months because of this, meaning that he cannot work as a doctor because his license to practice was suspended. Yeah, he was not allowed to get salary by becoming a doctor. So this is quite a heavy penalty. Alright, so do's and don'ts of clinical documentation. Alright, the first one is to be accurate and timely. You not only you have to document accurately, you have to document it timely, meaning that as fast as possible, yeah, as soon as possible, you should document it immediately. Alright, what I can see from my experience is that if your hospital is using online system or electronic medical records, this would be a problem. Because usually the laptop doesn't work, or the computer simply does not have a will to follow you for ward rounds. So what will happen is that the housemen have to do ward rounds, and they have to write on a piece of paper what is the plan for the day. Usually what happens is that this piece of paper will go missing. Yeah, so after ward round finish, they put in the pocket. After a while they cannot find the note, so it become a problematic issue, right? We do not have this issue when you are using paper-based system where you can actually write on the spot on the medical record itself. Okay, Although you are required to document it accurately and timely, sometimes you can actually make a retrospective documentation. This is to allow for you to rescue your patient first. For example, when the patient collapses, okay, you are expected to do CPR first, yeah, before documentation, right? So this is actually allowed as long as you document it within the day itself and as soon as possible. Okay, you cannot make a retrospective documentation that has happened 3 days ago. Yeah, that is still not appropriate. Okay, all right, so you need to use standard terminology. Remember, this medical records is a legal document. You should reflect your medical knowledge into your documentation and your professionalism into the documentation. So this is another bad example. Okay, let me read this. Informed by staff nurse, patient complaint of feel ngok ngek out of the wound site. Wound inspection plus maggots playing in the wound. Slough plus puffs. Turpentine applied and maggots tergedit and from the wound. Okay, so this is not a good documentation. It reflects your professionalism. Okay, so if this case went to the court, this would be a point to attack your credibility. And of course, your handwriting needs to be legible. If you yourself cannot read your own handwriting, that is very bad, right? So this is what we want to avoid, yeah. But this is very common, yeah. Fortunately, our pharmacists, our colleague pharmacists, they are trained to read your handwriting, right? But sometimes it is almost impossible. Okay, if you are using computer system, this is a blessing actually, right? So it is very common for you to make errors. It is acceptable to make errors, but just be mindful, do not use liquid paper. If you make an error, just make a single strikeout and then put your signature and time and date. Okay, this is example. Do not scribble like this. You just need to make a straight line across the error. Okay, and then you need to initial and put put the timestamp over here. All right, so you need to make correction, but you still need to be able to see what was the error that has been made. All right, so you cannot completely remove. Using liquid paper is a serious issue in a legal document, right? Another rules is to record changes and updates, right? So for every work that you do to the patient, for example, you want to take the blood from the patient, you were instructed by your specialist and the patient refused. Okay, this is something that you have to document in your clinical work. If you do in your clinical records, if you do not document, people can actually accuse you from not doing your work. So if you document at 6 p.m. Attempted to take blood from the patient refuse. Okay, advise the patient that this blood taking is important to make a proper diagnosis. Patient still refuse. Plan is to advise the patient again and revisit him in 1 hour's time. Okay, so if you have that documentation, the night people can actually understand better what has happened, and they can know what is the reason why the blood is not ready yet. If you do not write, nobody will know. Okay, so another don'ts, do not leave empty spaces between entries. So you have multiple entries, do not leave a big gap. This is also an issue in legal department lah. Alright, and of course do not use liquid paper. Alright, and most importantly, do not alter past entries. If you have made any mistakes in the past, like medical error, just leave it. Okay, you do not want to alter, because once you are caught, it will be a serious problem for you. Right, so this is a statement from the Malaysian Medical Council, good medical practice guidelines. Yeah, so it is already stated that notes should not be erased or altered. Okay, as they may indicate or defensive or cover-up action. Right, so let me share with you a case of Dr. Stanley Isaac, versus the government of Malaysia. This is a case that happened in Hospital Kuala Lumpur. What happened is that the doctor in charge was caught by the court, yeah, that he made alteration to the medical records. This has been confirmed by the other by the staff nurse and the other staff of the ward. Okay, so because there has been an alteration to the medical records, this information was used against the doctor, and eventually the doctor lost his case and has to pay a huge amount of money. Right? Do not forget signature and authentication. For every clinical entry you have to chop and sign. Okay, this is a medical legal documentation. For online system or electronic system, you has to use your own password so that you can actually sign off your entry. If you use the other person password, it means that the other person is actually seeing the patient and not you. Okay, do not share your password because you could get into serious trouble. So just to recap what we have learned over the 16 minutes, right? So what we want you to learn today in this chapter 1 is to understand why documentation is important in clinical work, understand what can happen if you do not do it properly, and then we want you to learn the do's and don'ts in clinical documentation. Right, so I have shared with you for this chapter a reading material for you to go through. Please go through them. Okay, thank you, and I see you in the next chapter.